I'm Sherilyn Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. This is episode 286 of the Brilliant Balance podcast. And today we're talking about my love-hate relationship with finish lines. So I have a confession to make. I haven't actually done a road race, like laced up my shoes and gotten out there in a decade or so. But in my 20s, I did a lot of road races. And I'm going to take a little trip down memory lane here at the beginning of this episode, if you'll indulge me. I was thinking back to the fact that when I was a teenager, I really hadn't found an athletic pursuit of any kind that really stuck. I played field hockey in high school. I was a cheerleader in high school, but all of it felt like it was because I wanted to be a part of the team, not because I really loved the activity. I can't say I was particularly great at it. And when I discovered running, which wasn't really until after college, I felt like I found this home base for myself when it related to physical activity, because it didn't require anyone else. It didn't require a lot of equipment. I could sort of have running shoes anywhere. And I was traveling a lot at the time for my job. And it didn't require a lot of coordination. Like there was no ball that I had to hit or catch or keep track of. And so for someone like me, that was really a good combination of factors. And I started running indoors on a treadmill at the gym and trying to build up some stamina. And there was such joy every time I would sort of hit a new threshold of the distance that I could successfully run. Like I can remember when it was a mile or 2 miles, or when it was 3.1 and I knew that correlated to a 5K. And it just kind of kept creeping upward until one day I ran 10 miles. And I remember telling a good friend that I had run 10 miles, and she asked me what I was training for. And I said, nothing. And she looked at me like I had 3 heads, because apparently one does not run 10 miles unless they are training for something. So she convinced me to do a 10K with her and some of her friends. And I was equal parts terrified and really excited about being in a race. I had dated a guy in high school who ran cross country, and the whole idea of being in races, which he regularly did, around the area, felt like something that someone else could do, not like something I could ever do. And when I laced up my shoes and kind of got in at the starting line of that first race, it was like such a transformational feeling of really being a part of that. And I ran really hard. Like I went out really fast and I put my all into this, as you do. And especially when I could see that finish line coming into sight. And if you've ever run a road race, you know this feeling of like, there's a moment you usually turn some kind of a corner and there it is. You can see this banner flying over the road, and just the surge of energy that came through me. I kind of picked up my pace and really ran hard up this final hill to get to the finish line, at which point I almost threw up. Probably not an uncommon experience in inexperienced race, people in races, but I had given everything I had in that final sprint toward the finish line. And that memory really is what is the inspiration for this episode, because there was so much good and so much excitement about that race and about pursuing that finish line. But also, I almost threw up. Like that was not a great piece of the memory. And so I think that what I want to do today is talk a little bit about finish lines and see if we can figure out what is the allure of them. What is the power that they hold? And what is the good that brings to us? And then also, what are some of the watch outs or challenges that come when we view lots of things in life as sprints to the finish line? Okay. So I started thinking about what is it about finish lines? And the first thing I thought of is they motivate us to begin. Like the whole point of doing that race was essentially finishing it, right? I was invited to do it by a friend. It was this motivation to get started. And I think finish lines help us harness all of that kind of on your mark, get set, go energy that's so powerful to getting us to start something. It's a goal orientation. And there's something about that, about just knowing that there's a goal that we are pursuing, sort of metaphorically categorized as the finish line, that's a very powerful reason for us to begin. And there's lots of places in our life that will start to look like finish lines if we look at them through this lens. And we're going to do some of that later in this episode. So the first thing about them that I love is they give us a reason to start, right? They give us a reason to put on our shoes and get out there, so to speak. And we can harness all that great energy of that on your mark, get set, go moment. The second thing that I think is really great about finish lines is they inspire stamina. There's something about knowing that it's within sight that allows us to say, like, I can do this. I think I can keep going long enough to get there. And I was sharing that moment when I turned the corner and the banner, over the road came into sight. And what happened in that moment was I picked up my pace because something in me said, okay, like, I've got this. I can make it to that finish line. In fact, I think I have enough left to go faster based on kind of my mental gauge of that distance. So finish lines used well can inspire stamina in us. They can help us keep going, in other words, once we've started, when we know where that finish line is. And the third thing that I think is really great about them, one of the reasons I love them, is they kind of orient us in time and space. So we know where we are relative to the finish line, right? It's a fixed point that we're able to say, okay, I know where I am. And so they sort of help us keep track in a non-overt way, like, of where we are. We don't have to be saying, like, I am at mile marker, whatever, right? Or I am this many days in. We just sort of have our eye on that, and it helps orient us to where we are. In some cases, it may also orient us to how far we've come, right? So my goodness, when the finish line is coming in sight, we're almost done. And so we have this sense that we've covered a lot of ground already. And I think maybe the pride of that, the kind of sense of accomplishment in that carries us that next surge forward. So all of those things are sort of positive and powerful attributes of finish lines that I was very cognizant of, literally in this road race. And then, as I said, I think we can talk about this metaphorically as well. There's also a little bit of a dark side or some challenges or watch-outs associated with finish lines. And I think they're worth talking about as well. The first is that the sight of a finish line can prompt a sprint, right? Even just the knowledge of a finish line can prompt a sprint. And what I mean by that is running faster than we can really sustain, right? We can view this as, okay, it's a short distance. I'm going to give it everything I have, and I'm going to get there. And that sprinting nature is not what every journey is designed to be. And so if it's prompting us to sprint because we're really goal-oriented toward the finish, we can end up running beyond what we can actually sustain, right? We can set a pace that's too fast for us. And that has kind of a secondary problem, which is that can tire us out. So the knowledge of the finish line and the fact that it prompts the sprint can cause us to be running too fast for too long, right? We can misjudge our ability to handle the sprint for that duration. And that can tire us out, or in my case, make us vomit, right? It is the level of overload that we can reach when we think, I'm going to be doing this for a short time, and then it turns out to be a long time. Really can mess with our physical stamina, our mental stamina, our emotional stamina, right? They can all get exhausted if we are sprinting for longer than we really planned to be. Hi, it's Cheryl Ann. Thanks for listening. Did you know that the ideas I share on this show are things I also can help you implement? If you want me in your corner helping you find more time for what fills you up, go to brilliant-balance.com/schedule and sign up for a free exploratory call. Give yourself this time. You'll be so glad you did. And the third watch out, the one that actually I think is maybe the biggest challenge when we take this out of road racing and into the real world, is finish lines can give us a perception that it's time to quit, right? They can be associated with this sort of belief that we deserve it, that we've done enough. We've put so much effort in that we're just done, right? It's time to quit. And the reality is, in a road race, that might be true, right? The finish line is a time to quit, at least for that day, to say like, okay, I am done with this particular run. But it's not our license to quit running forever, right? One finish line just says, well, what's the next race that we're going to do? So I think that ability to say, what is our license to quit driven by? Is it driven by the presence of a finish line, or is it driven by something else? Could be a concept that we want to think about a little bit. And I want to take this out of road racing and into the real world, where your mind maybe has already started to go, and think about what are some other places in life where we can be envisioning them as kind of a race with a distance and with a finish line in sight. One of the ones that comes up all the time with women who I coach is like physical preparation for some kind of big event. So this is often centered in getting in shape or losing weight, right? Kind of wanting to pull their physical appearance to a new level before some kind of big event. Now, I'm not saying I think this is a great idea, or I think this is like awesome that we do this as women. I'm just saying it's true, right? It happens a lot that we pick some event that is off in the future, and we set the distance. We say, okay, there's the finish line. It's the high school reunion. It's the daughter's graduation. It's something that we are preparing for. It's the family vacation. And by golly, we are going to be ready for it. And so we start changing all these behaviors around what we eat or our exercise routine or whatever in the name of being ready. And then we get to that moment and we never do those things again. And then the cycle repeats itself. So the next time there's an event, guess what? We have to prepare all over again, right? Because we prepared as though we had the license to quit as soon as that event happened. But because of that, we had to kind of start all over again. Another example would be, I am going to get this house in order, right? We are hosting company, your mother-in-law is visiting, or you're hosting some kind of party. And it's like, I am going to get this house in order. And there is this big effort and big intervention and big sprint to get to the finish line of that visit. And then the visit happens, and then everything goes back into disarray. Like there's no sustaining system after the event. Because why? Because there was no energy to create one, right? The whole approach of these sprints and finish lines implies once I get there, I'm done. And for most things, there is no done. There is instead a sense of what's next. Another example of this might be at work. If you are in a career that has a busy season, this comes up a lot in the finance world, particularly around accounting and tax season. And when we're heading into a busy season, it could be you work in a creative agency and you have a big campaign or a big pitch coming up. It could be you work in technology and you're working toward a product launch or an upgrade. All of those would sort of qualify as sprints with finish lines inside of the work environment. And I think the stories are legendary of what we will do to reach that finish line. I can't be home for dinner. I'm going to have to go in on Saturday. I have to go in early. I'm not working out these days because I'm in this season, right? Where everything sort of implies once it's over, I'll have all this time to do whatever it is that I really meant to be doing, right? To spend time with my family, to take care of myself, to go on date nights with my spouse. But what happens? What happens is that finish line isn't a finish line. It's not like, wow, we launched the product or tax day comes and goes, and then we get this huge break, there's just more work that follows, right? The next project comes on, the next client shows up. And so there's a bit of a mismatch here between these look like sprints. They feel like they should be sprints. They look like there's a finish line, and yet there's not, and what we're missing because of it is the energy reserve that's required to do the next thing, right? We really are leaving it all in the field, so to speak. We are ready to vomit at the finish line. And because of that, we don't have that reserve of energy that we need to do the next thing. So what's a better model? A better model might be to stop thinking of these as sprints and finish lines and to start thinking of them as mile markers or water stops. If we stay in the running world, there's a big difference between a finish line and a water stop. When you are approaching a water stop as a runner, and if you are a runner, you know this, people sort of slow down a bit, right? They slow their pace so that they can pick up that cup of water and drink it without spilling it all over themselves. Now, if you're a really elite runner, you don't slow down and you do spill it all over yourself and you don't care, right? But for the rest of us, there's a little bit of, I'm going to slow my pace enough to be able to pick this up, hydrate, maybe walk a few steps before I begin again. And there's a sense that that water stop is not the ending, that there's more on the other side of it, right? That when I get through this break, I have this little rest, I'm going to pick myself up and begin again. And that may be the better mental picture for us to hold when we are in these life events. That the high school reunion that we have been dieting and exercising to get to, or the big project that we have been sprinting through, or the event that we have been cleaning for, is not actually a finish line. And so what we want to do is slow down long enough to enjoy the experience, right? To be fully in that moment, but then to pick it up again, because those behaviors that we have been executing to get us there are probably the same ones we need to do to sustain it. And maybe we don't need to run quite so hard where we're so exhausted and we've taken everything out of ourselves if we know we have to have this energy reserve for whatever comes next. Are there some things in life that are truly finish lines? I think there are. I think there are some things in life where we're truly like, and that's that, I am done. But for most things, either the same activity picks up again, or there is a new start, right? Something like pregnancy is one that I think a lot of us conceived of as a finish line. Like, okay, I am going to get through this and I know I can do it because I only have another month or 2 months or whatever of carrying this baby. But what follows is motherhood. And talk about a chapter that needs a lot of energy to be in reserve, right? So we need to know that on the other side of some of these perceived finish lines is a new start, another journey that begins as one ends. And we want to be mindful of that so that we have the energy we need in the tank to run that next leg. So that's my invitation for you today, is to think about where in your life you have conceptualized something as a sprint to the finish, when it may actually be that you are approaching a rest, approaching a water stop, approaching a mile marker along a journey that will be continuing past that moment that you've held in your mind. And if you thought about it that way, how might it change your behavior? I will tell you, it definitely has changed mine when there have been key times that I have thought, oh, this is a short-term thing. This is something I'm just going to have to do for a little while. And then, of course, it's going to ease up. And at some point along that journey, when it became clear that this was not a short-term thing, this was actually something that was going to need to be sustained for longer than I had thought, that was when I was able to change my behavior and find a cadence, find a pace that I actually could sustain for a longer period of time. And that is exactly what I'm inviting you to do today. So here is what I would love for you to do. If you have an example that I did not share today of something that you have thought of as a sprint to the finish that you're going to try rethinking, I'd love for you to DM me and chat about it. You can hit me up on Instagram at cschoolnikki. And I also would love for you to share it with other women in this community. And the best place to do that is in our Facebook group. So if you're already in there, remember the Facebook group is called Brilliant Balance. Just go pop in with a comment. If you're not already in the group, request to join. Just go to Facebook and groups and find Brilliant Balance, and we will welcome you in to the conversation. And also, if you liked this episode and you have an extra minute that you can share it with a friend who might benefit, please do. I love it when people pass on these episodes, any of them, to someone who you think could find value. That is all for today, my friends. Till next time, let's be brilliant.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.